Hi everybody, this is Della from The Beauty of Play. My daughter and I just finished our Explorers unit. While everything is fresh on my mind, I'm going to share with you the books and resources and the projects that we used for this unit. For the spines of the book, we used Into the Unknown and Lives of the Explorers. We had come to European colonization in our history, and I wanted to include more than just European descent explorers, and so I made it an entire explorers unit, and we looked at all kinds of explorers from all over the world. So Into the Unknown was the perfect book for this, and not only is this filled with just wonderful information, but it also has these pullouts that show how the boats, or it's not just boats, but other vehicles, were made and loaded and what they comprised. So it went over for Marco Polo. It showed the caravan stations, and it also has wonderful maps. So I took several of the explorers for this. It has Zheng He from China, but I will have to say that this was still pretty Eurocentric in its composition. So I was looking for something else. Lives of the Explorer really filled that gap. This is filled with lots of different explorers. You can see here on the table of contents. And we used these two together to come up with the most of our explorers, and these were the books that we read first for each explorer. We started out with the Vikings, and I didn't get the opportunity to spend as much time as I wanted to last year when we did the medieval area for Europe, Golden Age for other areas of the country. And so we used this book. They came on Viking ships. It is about the saga from Eric the Red and Leif the Lucky. It's a great saga, and I love about living books is that there is so much that you learn about the history and how they lived and what they ate and where they the houses that they lived in and their daily chores and stuff. And this does a great job talking about all of those things. It does have a few traumatic scenes in it, so be aware of that. But this was a fabulous book, and in the back of the book there is a little excerpt that talks about what parts of the book were gleaned from history and what parts of the book that she embellished, which is always great. And just as a reference, we used this book to talk about some of the Norse mythology and figures in the Viking area. The next explorer that we did was Marco Polo, and we spent a little more time on him. He is in both the books, The Life of the Explorers and Into the Unknown. But this book in particular, The Animals that Marco Polo Saw, this was a favorite for both of us. The illustrations for this book are just amazing. And it really inspired us to do, we used some of these as inspiration for our watercolors in the main lesson book. I painted the scene here and she painted the lion. It is an absolutely beautiful book. Animals is a topic that she loves, and I think a lot of children love, and so it was a great way to introduce history with all the different animals that he saw in his travelers. We also used Demi's Marco Polo. She is a favorite author of ours. She just does fabulous books. And I love the illustration and the silver and gold inlay in her illustrations. The book is really long. We took 2 days to read this one because we were also reading a read aloud during this time. So there was that. And this was a treasure of a book. Marco Polo's Demi was recommended to me by Hannah at Pepper and Pine, but this one I just happened upon when I was looking for the Demi book. This is an interactive book, so it opens, and there are all these different pockets and tabs that you can move to find the information. It was just one of our favorite books. We had already, when we went through this book, we had already gone through several Marco Polo books. And so we didn't read every single piece of information in this book. Some of it was repetitive. But just the interaction and the maps, it's just a really fabulous book. All right. And can't really do Marco Polo without talking about Kublai Khan. So I got a book that went over Kublai Khan and his reign and the Mongols. This was also a very informative, good book. This book was recommended to me from Megan Nichols, and it is a family tree book. It talks about, it gives a little bit of information about the historical figure, but the really useful part, I feel like, is the family tree. And so we use this as reference because it had Genghis Khan and a few of our other explorers, but it definitely will have some of the people that we're going over in the next unit with the Renaissance. The next explorer that we went over was Ibn Battuta, and he is such an interesting explorer. I think that probably of every explorer as we go along, but he traveled so many miles. He was an Islamic explorer from Morocco, and the number of places that he went and the number of miles that he traveled and experience that he had were just absolutely remarkable. So we used this book, Traveling Man, and then we also used the book, The Amazing Travels of Ibn Battuta. They're widely different in illustration. They had a small amount of overlap in content, but mostly they were completely different styles of writing. So that was useful in filling any gaps for this explorer. The next explorer that we did was Zheng He, and this book was also recommended to me by Hannah with Pepper and Pine. It is an adult book, and though it did not have information that I could read to my daughter, I found it highly informative for me in presenting the Zhonghe information. There was information in both Lives of the Explorer and Into the Unknown. Went into the European colonization. So this book, I felt like was a great Around the World in 100 Years. It doesn't sugarcoat anybody, but it does go over the European explorers from Henry the Navigator, and I think the last explorer that they do, look here, is Ferdinand Magellan. So it gives a good overview. Again, it doesn't sugarcoat. We were amazed at how cruel these people were. So the particular explorers during this time period that we focused on were Columbus and Magellan. This is a book written from the native perspective of Columbus's, I don't know if you could say discovery, because he didn't even know where he was, but his voyage to the Americas. And this book, as well as this book here, one of the things that was really important to me is for my daughter to understand that no one really discovered anything in the Age of Discovery because all of the world was already pretty populated. And that each place the explorers went, the vast majority of the time, either the land was not habitable or there was someone already living there. So the wonderful thing, this book in particular, gives all the information about the people that were already living there. And this book does a great job. We didn't read it in its entirety, but not only does it talk a little bit about the people before, but the biggest thing this book does is talk about the impacts from the interchange that started to happen from the Eurasia, African continents to the other side of the world with the Americas. So both of these were very helpful. And then to finish up, the Columbus area, we did Animals of that Christopher Columbus saw. I thought from the Marco Polo that this would be a great book, but it does not have the same illustrator and not quite the same quality. And we were slightly disappointed by this one, but it's still, anytime that you can engage a child in their own interest, it's a wonderful avenue to introduce other subjects. So it still did that for us. It was fun to go through and see the different animals that he probably saw. And then this book also goes over Magellan's story. It is a long one, beautifully illustrated, lots of details. Very happy with this one. Also doesn't really gloss over, the impact that Magellan and the other European explorers had on the world. So the last explorers that we did were James Cook, Mary Kingley, the Picards, Matthew Henson, and the Apollo mission. And on James Cook, Mary Kingley, and the Picards, we just used the two books that were our spine, Into the Unknown and Lives of the Explorer. But Matthew Henson, he was a little difficult to find information on him. He is in the Lives of Explorer, and I found this picture book that was very good. He was someone that we were both impressed with, just his intellect and his skill and his ability to interact and learn the language of the Inuit people. He was pretty impressive. And of course, he trained sleigh dogs, and so that won our hearts pretty quickly. But he was a pretty interesting explorer, and this was a really good book for exploring him. And then the last book that we used during our Apollo, that was in addition to Into the Unknown, were the Hidden Figures. This was made into a movie, and then there is a novel and then a novel for young people. This is the picture book that we used for Hidden Figures, and it goes over 4 women and their roles and impact in making the Apollo mission happen. That was a pretty also interesting, I know I say that all the time, but it's so interesting to learn about all these different people and the impact that they had on the world. So a couple books I did not use, but I think are worth mentioning. Stowaway is a read aloud having to do with James Cook's mission, and we just didn't get to it. Our other read alouds were taking a little longer than I expected. But I do think this book would be worth reading or including in an explorer's unit. And this is a delightful book. Also, we just didn't have time to get to it because we spent so much time on Marco Polo with the other books that we didn't get to this. But this book is a series of fairy tales and stories that go along with different areas of the Silk Road. So each of these places along the Silk Road that they have highlighted, they've taken and added a story to the book. It's beautiful illustrations. They're great stories. And I think in history, stories, especially for children, have a huge impact and tell you a lot about the people during that time and just about their culture. So we didn't use this, but I would highly recommend this. And then this is one of the things that we used during our unit, in addition to making maps and illustrations and narrations, was a book of centuries. If you've not seen a book of centuries before, this is a Charlotte Mason concept. It's a timeline in a book. I just purchased a printed one off of Amazon. You can print them from Simply Charlotte Mason, or you can make your own. With my first child, we made our own. And then what we do, I keep a list of people, and for some of them, I'm insistent on what gets added, and for some of them, I ask her if that is something she would like to add to her book. But we just choose a picture from, usually I'm searching the internet and choosing a picture. She chooses it, and then I put the person and the date underneath. If it's an event, then I just put the event and the date. On some of them that I'm afraid that we might not remember their accomplishments, like with Matthew Henson, I put first person to the North Pole. But these are printed on label paper. There's just a whole sheet of sticker paper, and then we cut them out and then place them into her book of centuries. And onto our projects. So to begin with the Viking, she's taken some of these out, but we created a Viking ship out of felt. We looked up what the Viking ships were made of. I was inspired by someone else's Viking ship on Instagram, and she decided, instead of the red and white sail, that she wanted to make her own sail. We used our peg dolls, our diversity peg dolls. I have a video on that. I'll link it at the end of this one. We used them and created clothes after looking up what Viking people were likely to wear to create them. And we did have, and I feel like I need to send a caveat, she really wanted the helmets with the horns because of dragon riders. We did look up, and they do not wear horned helmets, but we did make those for hers. We made some axes, battle axes, and shields that we thought that they would have. So this was the project that we did for the Vikings, and we also made some runes for the Vikings. This was just air dry clay, and then she carved the rune symbols from the Norse mythology book into each of the clay pieces that she made. Probably one of our biggest projects was the Mongolian yurt. Let's see if I can move the camera to show you this one a little better. So we did this out of bamboo skewers. You can see the lattice here, and I will link the video that I used for inspiration on creating these skewers. And then these cloth pieces were tea towels. We ripped pieces of tea towels, 2 to go around and a couple for the top. We had to put them around a cardboard base in order to keep the yurt open. You can see the cloth falls off otherwise. And if you're looking at the top here, we connected the pieces of skewers with the rubber bands on the top portion here. And then we took a round piece of cardboard and placed the skewers through this. Obviously the proportions were not correct on this, and if I did it again, I would cut each of the skewers in half and then construct the yurt. But I still feel like it was a really good project that worked really well, and she had an understanding of the yurts, how they were made, and how the people in Mongolia lived. So another one that we did for Marco Polo, I just have one here, but we dyed silks and with natural dyes. That turned out to be an absolutely phenomenal project. Super easy to do. I bought the silks from Dharma Trading Company. I'll link it on my website. And we used turmeric, red onion, and beet. The beet did not work at all, but we were able to salvage the beet cloth by putting in the leftover turmeric. So it gave it a much lighter, beautiful golden color, but they dyed beautifully. And in addition to having silks for the unit, she now has play silks. And it just worked out that the colors that we chose were beautiful fall colors, and so they were perfect because we did this unit in the fall. The next project that we did was this paper caravel model, and I will also link this. An author has so generously created and gives away for free this paper model caravel. And so we printed it out on cardstock and then cut the pieces out and placed them together. So this was also a really nice project. And then the other project that I wanted to show you from her main lesson book was an art project that we did. This is her Explorer's main unit page. Was this beautiful pastel drawing that she did. This is from waldorfish.com. We use them for art. Most of the time I transformed their art lessons into something that we're using for a unit, but this one just happened to be perfect. It was Viking themed. And then I'll go through and show you the rest of her main lesson book. We did lots of maps, which I freehanded, and then she added color through watercolors, sometimes colored pencils. We did a few watercolor pieces, and she did lots of narrations. Narrations are something, main lesson book is something that I always fall a little behind on. Not always, but most of the time. And so I don't know if you have heard me talk about the process before, but what usually happens is that she gives me a verbal narration that I type up, and we cut it into sentences. She rearranges it, and then we usually work on something that we're working on literary during that time. Maybe similes, maybe appositives, maybe sentence expansion using a conjunction. There are all kinds of different things that we might use. And we go through this process. The first day she narrates, then I type it up. The second day we cut it up, put it in order, make the adjustments that we're working on. The third day I retype it. She makes sure that she likes the order, and then she copies it into her notebook. But we ran out of time on this, and so the first few in her notebook, she has done that process, but towards the end of the notebook, I have just placed her narrations into the notebook. So really fun note, we were trying to mix it up a little bit, and her narration for Columbus is written from the point of view of a parrot on the island, and you can see this cute little parrot on her boat. And so that is our Explorers unit. I'll link everything in my website. If you enjoyed the video, you can give me a thumbs up, and you're welcome to subscribe. Until next time.